Today, we're going to dive into the incredible life of Prithviraj Awasthi. Now, he's a figure from Nepal's far west, and while his name might not be familiar, his story is just this powerful lesson in leadership, and right at its core is a fascinating contradiction that we really need to unpack.
And this, right here, captures the central puzzle of his life. How could one person be celebrated by two totally opposite political systems? I mean, think about it. On one side, he's getting medals from autocratic kings, and on the other, he's being honored after his death by the very democratic republic that overthrew those kings.
So that's the big question, right? How did Prithviraj Awasthi manage to earn the respect of, well, sworn enemies and become this unifying force for actual progress? The answer, it turns out, starts with where he came from and what he stood for. So first, let's just take a quick look at these honors he received. Because this isn't just some list of awards, it's practically a map of his influence across some of Nepal's most chaotic decades. But see, his story doesn't begin in the halls of power in the capital. Nope. It starts way out in one of Nepal's most neglected regions. Awasthi's whole character, his entire life's mission, was really forged in the fire of the immense challenges of his homeland in the far west. So just try to picture this for a second. This was the reality in the Batati district where he grew up. We're talking chronic underdevelopment, deep-seated inequality, widespread forced labor, and things like basic healthcare and education almost non-existent. But this environment didn't break him, it built him. And if you need one number to really grasp the sheer scale of the problem, it's this: 80%. An 80% illiteracy rate. Can you imagine trying to empower a community when 4 out of every 5 people can't read or write? That was the mountain he decided to climb. So what lit the fire for him? Well, it was a massive political event. As a young man, he saw the fall of the old exploitative Rana regime. And that power vacuum didn't inspire him to go grab power for himself. Instead, it inspired him to start organizing his community from the ground up. And this brings us to the next really tricky part of his life: service under autocracy. A whole new regime takes over, and Awasthi has to figure out how to keep doing his work, not as some outsider protesting, but by working from within a deeply oppressive system. For nearly 30 years, this was the political reality in Nepal. Under this thing called the panchayat system, the king just dissolved parliament, banned all political parties. Awasthi had to navigate this incredibly restrictive environment where, any wrong move could have had really serious consequences. His adaptability here is just remarkable. He starts off in the 50s when there's all this democratic energy. But when the panchayat system comes in, what does he do? He just changes tactics. He starts quietly organizing farmers. Then he strategically moves to a new district to expand his work, always serving the community, right up until that system finally crumbles. And this quote, man, it just nails it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures his role during this tough time. He wasn't some powerful government official, and he wasn't some revolutionary leader in hiding. He was something totally different, a people's bridge, connecting the rural struggles he knew so well with the nation's bigger dreams. Then, in 1990, everything changes. The panchayat system finally collapses, opening up a brand new chapter for Awasthi. After decades of working quietly from inside the system, he could now step out into the open and fight for what he believed in on a national stage. Okay, now here's where his story gets really interesting. Running as a candidate for the communist CPN-UML party, he contested elections 3 times, and he never actually won a seat. But hold on, this isn't a story of failure, not at all. By getting all this rural support, he gave a voice to people who were never heard, and he became a super important political influencer. It just goes to show you don't need a title to have real influence. And just look at what he was campaigning for. Even when he's playing the cutthroat game of politics, his focus never, ever wavered. It was always about real, tangible human welfare. He wasn't chasing power, he was chasing progress for the people he had spent his entire life serving. And that really brings us to his ultimate legacy. It wasn't defined by elections won or lost. No, it was defined by the real, lasting impact of his quiet service on the ground, miles away from the political capital. And this number? Wow. It says it all. Over 5,000 families. That's not some abstract political victory. That is thousands of real lives directly improved because of the grassroots cooperatives he started, which provided everything from small loans to seeds and tools. His work was so diverse, too. He wasn't just doing one thing. The guy was everywhere. He was setting up health clinics that saved lives, organizing these education drives that broke down huge cultural barriers for girls, and he was standing up for the rights of indigenous communities. He was literally building a better society from the bottom up. And so, we come full circle, right back to where we started. This table just makes it crystal clear. Honored by King Mahendra, the guy who created the whole panchayat system, then honored by his successor, King Birendra, and then, decades later, honored by the Republic of Nepal. And why? Because his service to the people was bigger than politics. It transcended all of it. This might be the best way to describe him. He didn't lead some loud, violent revolution. His was a quiet one, fought in villages and health clinics and classrooms. He created profound, revolutionary change without ever looking for the spotlight. In a world that is so often focused on titles and power and fame, the story of Prithviraj Awasthi really forces us to stop and ask a pretty fundamental question. Is leadership about the position you hold or the lives you change? What is the true measure of a legacy, really?
Okay, let's unpack this. We often focus on national political figures, the ones whose names are always in the headlines in Kathmandu.
Right, big names.
But today, we are taking a deep dive into someone whose impact was just immense, really systemic, but was also deeply rooted in the most remote parts of Nepal. We're talking about Prithviraj Awasthi.
And you wanted to understand how powerful social change actually happens on the ground.
Exactly.
Particularly in these marginalized areas. And during times of, just intense national upheaval, Awasthi's life is basically the perfect blueprint for that.
So that's our mission. We're tracing his journey from being a local activist in the rugged hills of Baitati.
Super isolated.
To becoming this revered leftist leader in the plains of Kailali. And we want to see how his core commitment to human welfare just endured
across 3 totally different political systems: monarchy, the panchayat era, and then democracy.
And to really get it, you have to picture the scene. We're in far west Nepal. It's a region of rugged terrain, incredible ethnic diversity.
And chronic underdevelopment. In the 1960s, where he started in Baitati, the challenges were staggering. We're talking illiteracy rates of over 80%.
80%, wow.
Yeah, and on top of that, these deeply entrenched feudal inequities, the state's reach was minimal, maybe even non-existent in some places.
So what's so fascinating to me here is that Awasthi wasn't just, reacting to the politics of the day.
No, not at all.
He was literally forced to build the infrastructure of welfare beneath the state, basically because the state just wasn't showing up.
Exactly. His story is really a microcosm of Nepal's turbulent 20th century. It shows how real activism and political dedication had to intertwine to lift communities up.
So let's start at the very beginning. Awasthi was born in Shankarpur in Baitati district, early 20th century.
And his formative years were really defined by seeing this intense poverty and also the power vacuum that opened up after 1951.
Right, after the Rana regime collapsed. And for anyone who needs a refresher, the Ranas were this hereditary oligarchy that kept Nepal basically feudal and closed off for a century.
So once that system fell, Awasthi just jumped into action in the 50s. His focus was on the absolute basics of human welfare.
Life and death stuff.
Literally. Organizing people to build village wells for clean water, starting literacy drives for adults who'd never had a chance to learn.
And advocating for land rights, right.
Fiercely for the huge numbers of landless farmers who were still, stuck in this oppressive feudal system.
But then the whole political climate changes and it gets dangerous.
Very dangerous.
In 1960, King Mahendra carries out a royal coup, dissolves democracy, and imposes the partyless panchayat system, a completely centralized, top-down government.
And this is Awasthi's first real political test. And instead of, say, retreating or going fully underground, he chose this path of strategic engagement.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, he started mobilizing villagers in a place called Surnaya 6 to actively resist Beth Bigar.
And remind us what Beth Bigar was.
It was a system of forced unpaid labor. Local elites would demand it from villagers, all under the guise of it being for the state.
Okay. Mobilizing against forced labor under a new, powerful royal government. That sounds incredibly risky.
Oh, it was.
How did he pull that off without being immediately crushed?
He was just a master of pragmatism. He focused on things like cooperative farming.
I see.
So encouraging mutual aid, shared ownership of resources. It was a subtle way of challenging feudal control. He was basically using the panchayat's own public messaging, all this talk of class harmony, against the system's elites.
So he was quietly working for real anti-feudal equity right under their noses.
Exactly. And those localized efforts, as risky as they were, made him an indispensable people's bridge.
That local foundation, though, eventually led to a big strategic shift in the 1970s.
It did.
He realized there were limits to what he could do in Baitadi because it was so isolated. So he relocates to Geta in Kailali district.
Which is in the Terai, the southern plains near India, a totally different world.
So this was a move from, isolated hill activism to networked frontier activism.
That's a perfect way to put it. I mean, Baitadi was stunning, but economically stifling. Kailali, on the other hand, was a dynamic frontier. It was a hub for migrant workers, for trade, communication. They called it the breadbasket of the Far West.
And this move allowed him to evolve his work from just survival aid to something more complex.
Much more complex, a networked welfare system.
But what kind of work was he doing in this new environment?
He really intensified things. He was running informal health camps during these devastating cholera outbreaks, which were really common in the border areas.
And beyond health.
He was focusing on socioeconomic uplift, supporting widow rehabilitation. I mean, that was truly groundbreaking work in such a conservative society back then.
And the youth clubs too, right?
Yes, but not just for fun. They were specifically for vocational skills training, giving young people a real trade.
But I have to ask, if his ideals were fundamentally anti-feudal, leftist, how did he operate within the panchayat system for 3 decades?
It seems like a contradiction, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, he rose to district-level roles. He successfully pushed for state money for irrigation projects, for schools.
It comes down to revolutionary action versus revolutionary results. Awasthi understood leverage.
How so?
He used the panchayat structure, especially under King Birendra's Back to the Village campaigns, to get tangible benefits for marginalized people.
Like schools and water.
Exactly. Things that directly undercut the feudal structures he hated.
Here you go.
He was a functional revolutionary. He worked the system's levers for the people's benefit, all while, privately maintaining ties to underground communist networks.
The precursors to the CPN-UML.
The very same. For our listeners, that's the Communist Party of Nepal, Unified Marxist-Leninist, which is a major political force in the country today. He was playing the long game.
So he was using the panchayat's own money to build a leftist constituency.
Absolutely. A constituency built on gratitude and real support, even if it couldn't be called leftist out loud.
And then that support finally comes out into the open. 1990. The People's Movement, the Jana Andal in the fore.
The defining moment. Multi-party democracy is restored.
And Awasthi steps forward as a candidate for the CPN-UML.
He throws himself into it. He contests the Baitadi 1 constituency multiple times, 91, 94, and 99.
And here's the surprising part. He never actually won a seat.
Never. He secured second place each time, usually against the really entrenched Nepali Congress Party.
Okay, so then why are we focusing so much on someone who didn't win?
Because his electoral defeats were actually massive victories for political mobilization. His close results proved there was robust, undeniable rural support for the leftist agenda in the Far West.
It amplified the UML's presence.
Hugely. And his persistence showed that principled activism could survive electoral setbacks.
And his campaign message, what was the core of it?
It was never just rhetoric. It was always rooted in service. He focused on measurable goals, debt relief for farmers, aggressive women's literacy programs, fighting corruption.
Real practical things.
And inclusive welfare. He was a huge champion for Dalit empowerment. And even out of office, he kept serving in advisory roles, like as chief of a campus in Baitadi, always pushing for local governance reform.
So the true measure of his impact wasn't in Kathmandu's parliament at all.
Not even close.
It was in pioneering this whole social service sphere, creating community-led welfare structures long before modern NGOs were a thing in that region.
The scope of it is just astounding. In Baitadi and Kailali, he founded these really sophisticated self-help cooperatives. They weren't just discussion groups.
They were more like community banks.
Pretty much. They functioned as resource centers, distributing seeds, tools, and microloans to over 5,000 families.
The source material I read mentioned this unique ideological blend he had. How did he combine Marxist principles with, of all things, Gandhian ideas? That seems like a strange mix.
It sounds strange, but it was brilliant in its simplicity.
Go on.
Marxist equity gave him the goal: redistribute wealth and power from the elites to the laborers. But Gandhian self-reliance gave him the means.
Ah, I see. So the community owned the solution.
Exactly. Instead of just waiting for a distant state or some charity to help, he wasn't creating recipients of aid. He was building resilient, self-sustaining organizations.
And it went beyond farming co-ops.
Oh, yeah. He organized labor unions for seasonal migrants, who were a hugely exploited group. He advocated for indigenous rights for communities like the Lama and the Rote. Plus, those mobile clinics and sanitation drives we mentioned, they significantly reduced infant mortality.
It was an applied, practical revolution, one village at a time.
It's why historians call him a quiet revolutionary. He was less flashy than the firebrands in the capital, but so instrumental in grounding Nepal's dream of a welfare state in the harsh reality of the far west.
And that grassroots success eventually became undeniable on a national level.
It did. His models, this move away from feudal charity towards rights-based activism, they profoundly influenced national policy. Things like the Local Self-Governance Act of 1999, his work was the proof of concept.
Now, this is the part that I find truly remarkable, because it shows how nonpartisan his core mission really was.
The recognition he received.
Exactly. From across the entire political spectrum, over decades of volatility.
It's an extremely rare honor roll. While he was actively working within and also challenging the panchayat system.
He was getting awards from the very kings who created that system.
Yes. King Mahendra gave him a major civilian medal in 1967 for his early cooperatives.
And then King Birendra 2 decades later, in 1985.
Another honor for his flood relief work and education drives in Kailali. It just shows how essential his work was seen to be, even by 2 powerful kings who had banned opposition politics.
And that recognition didn't stop when the monarchy fell. It continued right into the Republican era.
It did. Posthumously, after he passed in the early 2020s, the Democratic government in 2022 gave him one of the highest civilian orders. They were actively bridging his long history of service, even his panchayat-era work, with modern Republican values.
And it wasn't just the state. The institutions recognized him too.
Right. Nepal's top welfare body, the Social Welfare Council, gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2005.
So if you look at the whole picture honors from kings, from the republic, from the leading welfare institution, it tells an incredible story.
It tells you his service was so essential, so tangible, that it just transcended the bitter political divides of 4 different governments. His work was simply indispensable to the far west.
We started this looking for a shortcut to understanding grassroots power. And what we found in Prithvi Rajawasi is the very definition of resilience. A man who moves from the isolation of Baitadi to the networked plains of Kailali and never, ever surrenders his commitment to the marginalized, even when those mainstream political rewards stayed just out of reach.
His life is such a crucial reminder, I think, for activists and policymakers today, that true leadership isn't defined by grand speeches from the capital,
But by quiet, persistent acts of welfare.
quiet acts that reach those most in need, building dignity and self-reliance from the ground up.
So, a final thought for you to take away. If Awasthi could successfully integrate these deep ideological commitments, Marxist equity as the goal, Gandhian self-reliance as the method, into practical structures that were respected by both a monarchy and a republic, what does that tell us about the fundamental principles you need to build truly sustainable human welfare, no matter what political ideology is in charge? Something for you to mull over.